And that's really about the time that the term memory care and Alzheimer's care in senior living started to sprout up as a real opportunity. Welcome back to Next Gen by NuCare, the podcast for senior living providers who don't have time to find solutions for their own business. If you want the latest technologies and practices for senior living care, this is the podcast for you. My guest today is Delores Moyer. She's a trailblazer in developing memory care services over the last 40 years. She also happens to be my mom. I'm really excited for her to tell her story of her journey through developing assisted living for people with memory care services and where she's at today in a very unique situation, both operating assisted living communities in her now 80s and living in an assisted living community. So hi everybody. I just want to introduce our guest today. I have somebody that's been a mentor of mine my entire life and career, both personally and professionally. I'd like to introduce my mom, Delores Moyer. She's been in senior living for probably as long as I've been around, one way or another, and I just want her to come in and share her story about how she got here. And she's had some really unique experiences over the last 40 plus years, and she is still in the business and just celebrated her 80th birthday yesterday, so pretty exciting things. So yeah, welcome, Mom. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm very honored to be here.
Why don't we get started? Talk to me a little bit about, tell everybody about your career, how you got started in senior living and as a nurse, and a little bit about how you got started in all of this.
Well, I went into nursing right out of high school and did lots of different things. I was a nurse practitioner for 20 years, nationally certified. I've been director of nurses of hospital and administrator of a nursing home, and done ICU, ER, lots of things. I just always knew there was something else I probably should be doing, but I just kind of was waiting for it. And I went to grad school because the position that I had, they required that I go on and get my master's in nursing. And all of the really fun, interesting, important research was being done, I felt, by the geriatric people. And I was just taking a few geriatric courses, and it kind of dawned on me, I'd always kind of gravitated towards the senior environments, senior care, senior courses when I was teaching in nursing. And I probably should be over there in geriatrics, so that's what I did. And then I got my master's degree in geriatric nursing. And while I was just ending up with grad school, I was working as a consultant for an accounting firm, and we had to stop serendipitously at this new CBRF that I didn't understand, nor had I seen. Walked in the door with the partner that I was with.
So to just clarify, when you say CBRF, for those people outside of the state of Wisconsin.
Yep, community-based residential facility, and that's really in Wisconsin the group home type licensure. That was the only type of licensure at that time. Eventually, we wrote, and I was involved with writing the apartment.
What was the time frame of this? About what year?
This was 87.
So 1987 is when you really started hearing about.
Walked in the door, and I said, you know what? This is what my grandma Hattie should have had. 10 years before that, my grandma had dementia. We knew nothing about dementia, did all the wrong things. My family expected me to correct them. I had no clue. and we didn't, as an industry, know. I walked in that door and said, "This is what my grandma Hattie should have had." And from that day forward, I worked on starting an assisted living company.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, in addition to your master's in nursing, I think you're a pretty unique duck, so to speak, because you happen to also have another master's degree.
Yep, I did get shortly after, in the late 80s, I got my master's degree in an MBA in finance, and yeah, because I knew I was starting a business and I didn't know how to read spreadsheets, make up spreadsheets, and I didn't know much about marketing. Knew a lot about the operations, but I just thought, this is what I need to do, and so I went into the MBA program. So yeah, and there were only of the 32 people in that class, there were only 5 females and 7 people that were in healthcare. So we were unique ducks in those days.
Yeah, I obviously lived through that when I was going through high school and then into college as you were getting started in all of this. And I was, pursuing my healthcare administration degree. So yeah, I got to watch some of this evolve as a family, and how you even moved from Illinois and doing your consulting. So go back to your consulting just for a minute. When you were doing consulting and you were working with, at the time, primarily nursing homes, what exactly was it in the mid to late 80s? What were you doing for them?
Well, I was the biggest thing I was doing, I would say 80% of what I did as a consultant over that 3.5, 4 years was helping small hospitals to convert wings that were closed down. Because in those days, there were too many beds because of the funding, whole variety of things. They had these beds, and they were looking for how could we make them financially productive. And so I would come in, and it would usually take me about 6 months to convert over, plans. So they were converting over the physical plant, and then training the team members, because in those days we did not know anything about dementia. And what I knew was, I had a master's degree in nursing, as I had said, but we had about, in our 2.5 years of grad school, we had approximately 3 or 4 hours of dementia, because nobody was doing research, nobody do. So I used that 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever, information, and then what we had learned and how we were able to be successful other places. So I just used that then in the next project that I did, and then oftentimes they'd have me come back and say, "Can you do some more training?" And then,
so what specifically, you said you were taking wings of these nursing homes that were basically unused and converting them to...
Well, most of them in about, actually more than 50% of them were hospitals.
Okay, in hospitals. Small hospitals. And what were you converting them to?
The rest of them were nursing homes, yes.
What were you said you were converting them, but you didn't explain...
Oh, to dementia.
Dementia-specific wings.
Yeah. In those days, that was a unique concept. Putting all the dementia people together and doing programming that's helpful for that. In fact, there were some people that said that wasn't a good thing. I had just seen the success enough times that people can tell you they're wrong, but if you've seen it and you've done it, you proceed because you know that it can be done.
Right. And almost, 40 years later, clearly it's the right model, because that's the model that exists. That's the model that survived. So when you programmatically you said it was good, but how did it work for those organizations financially?
Oh, it was that I had much more work than I could even, many more projects offered to me than I could do. And so I could be pretty selective, because they became very, it usually would take about 6 months to kind of ramp up, because people would say, "I don't know why all these people with dementia together." And then when they saw the results, or the results of another organization, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is like a miracle. I mean, literally, I have people say that to me. My mom has been just really god awful. Well, not yeah, challenging. Thank you. And the family members might say that. I wouldn't say that. But, um, and now she's a different person. And yeah, so we just had huge successes, and they were very therapeutically sound, but they were also financially very sound.
And that's really about the time that the term memory care and Alzheimer's care in senior living started to sprout up as a real opportunity. And then, so fast forward through that consulting side, and how did you then get started into the assisted living, senior living side of it, away from the skilled nursing side?
Well, I had been doing this in small hospitals and nursing homes for several years, 2.5 to 3 years. That's when I then walked into this, as I say, very serendipitously, walked in with a partner, saw this setting, and I'm like, this is what we're missing. This is small, home-like, and it's going to be even more therapeutic. It was my total belief. And sometimes when you're doing something, and I was still pretty young, and you think the impossible is possible, but sometimes then you make it possible because you believe it.
So describe that little home that you went into.
Yeah, you walked in, it was about, I haven't even thought about this in a long time, maybe 16 to 18 beds. And as opposed to wings, we were talking about 25, 30 people. So it was smaller, it was home-like. You walked in and it looked like it was a big home for people. And you walked down the hallways and they looked like bedrooms that any of us would go into. And it just, in my, as they say, in my gut, it just felt like this was the additional piece that would make this even go to a higher level.
Okay, so you saw this model and it was kind of an epiphany of like, this is where we need to go. And this is not only a good therapeutic model, but financially this makes sense too. We've seen it work, with these wings, and now there's a way to do it as more of a standalone setup without all of the nursing services and ancillary services that you have in a nursing home, because my understanding is these people at the time didn't have as many physical needs, and they're often in fairly healthy, but they needed programming. They needed.
Yes, and I also believed that it was going to be possible to supplement even those higher care level needs by bringing organizations in, hospice, home health, PT, OT, bringing all of those in and doing it right there at the assisted living facility, but bringing them in, but not putting a department in, which made then, or would have made then, that home-like environment seem much more like a nursing home than a home.
So at that time, you're still in Illinois and consulting, and you saw this model, and then how did you end up then really making the leap into owning and operating an assisted living community specifically for people with dementia? Also.
Well, you may or may not believe this, but the next weekend, and at that time we were living in Illinois, the next weekend, or the next week, I set up on the weekend, Saturday, 5 appointments for people that I thought or other people were recommending to me as investors. And we just started meeting with people. And I had somebody else that was interested, that was in grad school with me. And from then on, with very few exceptions, and I mean every, we were up driving from Illinois into Wisconsin to meet with people, and shortly thereafter, I don't know, a month, 2 months, but shortly thereafter, we incorporated. I knew we were going to do this, and it was not a matter of let's see if it's going to happen. It was just a matter of we were going to make it happen, and it was only a matter of we didn't know what we were doing, but neither did anybody else, and so we were going to figure it out, and we we're going to make it happen. And so we did that actually for about 6 months. Everybody was like, oh, what an interesting, two things. What an interesting concept, number one. Number two, if nobody else is doing that, which they weren't, they were doing assisted living for the frail elderly, but not for dementia. Why aren't other people doing it? And my response to that was, well, before the first McDonald's was put up, nobody thought that was possible either.
So fast forward to, the home that really got it all started and kicked it off, to the Connors home. And tell me how that came about, and a little bit about the Connors home, and then how you got involved and how that really got things rolling.
So we one gentleman that I had called probably 25 times plus for these Saturday meetings, who never took my call, who always said too busy, whatever, took my call after 25 calls. He picked up the phone and he said, "Hi, you are very persistent." I said, "Yes, I am." Long story short, this gentleman became one of our investors. And he knew about this small 8-bed facility that was dementia specific, that was for sale, that he said was affordable. And we did some spreadsheets and said, yeah, if we have this full, even at 8 beds, this makes money. And so we bought it in November of, let me think about it, November of '89. So we had been working, actually by the time we bought it, we had been working on this over a year, but we were incorporated, we were ready to go, we bought it, and immediately started, converting over, and lost a whole bunch of staff because they were like, what do you mean you want us to do X? We said, yep, it's not optional, so, and then but we had started to build another one in Beloit. That was a 12-bed, this was an 8-bed, and it was, the idea was to do dementia care, but nobody was really minding the store to say, this works, this doesn't work, and we just came in and said, okay, this is the structure, this is what we want you to do, we want you to be creative, but within these guidelines. And it started working so well. Then the next February, we opened up a facility in Beloit, and then the next summer that would have been then 90, and then the summer, July of 90, the banker who, we went to a bunch of banks, and the one that would finance the Beloit facility, the Beloit facility, building from scratch, said, I will loan you this money if you build an assisted living, not dementia specific, in our little bitty small town. And I went, oh, this is going to be a little, but so we decided we'd do it and we would make it work, and it eventually got converted over to dementia care. But so there were little stumbling or major stumbling blocks along the way, but we just kept going and trying to figure out how we would go. And then long about this time, in the 91, we started, I went to all the conferences, and I was very involved in the National Assisted Living Association, actually helped to found, was one of the founders of the Wisconsin Assisted Living Association. And as we were talking to all these people, the biggest skeptics were the finance people. And they're like, you cannot make money in these small facilities. I said, well, we're doing it, so you need to look at this. We went on with this, and then there's kind of a end to this story, but we can wait with.
So, yeah, so 1989 is when it all got started. And you moved from Illinois up to Wisconsin. You had a couple of small buildings with, some potential investors, a bank that had shown some faith in that this might work. But the reality was it was still pretty small. You had an 8-bed, a 12-bed, and then I don't remember if it was 17 or 19-bed in Clinton that you talked about, with some plans to continue to grow. But you also, while you were doing all that, you were also doing something else, right? As you were starting your company? You were working at...
Well, yeah, I worked at the university.
You worked at UW, University of Wisconsin Hospital.
Yeah.
Full-time.
As a clinical, yep.
Full-time as a
clinical nurse manager, which was more than full-time.
Yeah. So you had two parallel career paths going at the same time, knowing what the end game was. And, you always brought up it was interesting because you applied to just work on the floor as a nurse. But then because you had all these advanced degrees, they said, no, we need you as a manager. not on the floor. But you explained to them what you were doing, and they said that's okay. And which was pretty unique back then, I think, that they would be open to you, having an end date, whenever that was going to be, that you were starting up a business and still working at the, University of Wisconsin Hospital as a clinical nurse manager. And then you found more investors and some builder investors and fast forwarded through that, and you named the company Elder Haus with the Haus. So what's the story with that?
I don't know. It's sometimes you just need to be a little creative because otherwise, what are you going to do? But it was, we just took the elder piece, which was what we were kind of all about, and the Haus was just just set us apart a little bit. People would ask questions. Why do you spell it like that? Well, there was no real reason other than it just felt like, a branding. We did a lot of branding stuff in grad school in the MBA program, and it was helpful. I think in the early years.
Yeah, and then so fast forward just a couple of short years, when I actually came on board, as I was working at University of Wisconsin Hospital in the marketing department, and you brought me over, and I got the privilege of running the Connors home. I can't remember, it was 1994 maybe into 95, and by then you had several locations going, and that Elder Haus had grown quite a bit, and there were locations throughout Wisconsin at that point by 1996. And do you remember how many about locations there were?
97, we were 23
of these, Alzheimer's, dementia-specific care locations throughout Wisconsin, all 16, 19 number of 8-bed locations, all very different than most people experienced as assisted living expanded throughout the country. A lot of states have a lot of larger sized homes, and I know we had some specific reasons because there was public funding available first for 8 beds, and the first 16-bed building that you built. Tell me about that. Why was it 16 beds, and why was there a big firewall down the middle?
Well, it was 16 beds because the funding that there was matching federal funding that would come in if you stayed with 8 beds. And so we worked probably almost a year. I don't know, 10, 11, 12 months on with the surveyors to say how could we have 16 a unit of 16, which financially really was more, with 8 beds, one or two, especially two empty beds, all of a sudden now you're not making money anymore. But if you have 16, you can have a couple beds and you're still making money, not as much, and it gives you a little more breathing room. And so finally, after meeting with everybody under the sun multiple times, surveyors and state level people, county level people, all various people, the decision was made that if there was a firewall there, those really were always treated by the state as a separate, as two separate entities with the firewall. And so we put a firewall in there. We could then have the advantages of a larger facility, but the funding for the smaller facility.
Yeah. So from a very early point in the development of your career and your company, you did feel the need to serve people who didn't have private pay funds available, and that's a conscious choice you made.
Yes. Yes, that was exactly right. Turned out to be financially was a good one, but we just said from the beginning that we wanted to be able to do that, and it had gotten more difficult. About that same time when we were up to 20, 23, 25, depending on how you counted some of them or whatever. All these finance people that kept saying this is not, you can't make money at it. They invited me to their national conference, NIC, which is the National Investment
National Investment Conference, which is it's for investors. It's still happening. I think next month there's one, and it's for investors in senior living.
Yep. And so they invited me to come and speak, and there were, I don't know, 700-800 people there, and I got up and I said, you know what? You guys out there in the audience, because literally there were about 3 women in the audience. In those days, the finance people were really all women. But you have been saying you can't make money. I'm here to tell you that we are making money. You can make money, and you need to look at this model. And there's this big laugh. Well, first it started with like a little ripple, and then there was this big laugh, and then then there was this big applause, because they're like, I know a lot of them are like, yeah, I've been telling her that for like 8 years and 7 years, and she wouldn't listen, and now she is telling us that. So it was one of those things that was kind of a special moment to be vindicated.
Right. No, it was very neat to then have that presence on a national level, which then turned into a company merger with investors that came from very prominent name in both not just senior housing, but the hospitality industry, and a very influential family still to this day in the country that really was a neat partnership of yours, correct?
Yeah, it was very cool, and it's also cool to see how the super rich live.
So who was that with?
We flew a lot on their airplanes, and
yeah. So what family was it? Who was it that believed in what you were doing and really invested at the next level with you?
Well, the primary person was Penny Pritzker, and she ended up being for Obama, the Secretary of Commerce so she was the one that was hands-on, went to the meetings with us. We traveled about every 6 weeks, and so if her plane was not available, then J.B. Pritzker, who you might recognize because he's now the governor of Illinois, And yeah, he'd be over there messing around. I'm always like, "Do you live at the airport? You're always here when we're." But I think he just wanted to.
No,
No,
I've
nobody's
always
going to
found
take
it
there.
pretty interesting that that generally speaking isn't something that they've been recognized for, but they were one of the leaders in investing in senior living, and they had their own, company called Classic Residence by Hyatt, and that alone was a standalone. But then they, expanded beyond that with Encore Senior Living and with Elder Haus, and really helped expand things on a national level, with a number of other, public companies and other companies nationwide that when, in the 90s, assisted living really took off as a concept. So then, we both had the pleasure, our family had the pleasure of experiencing that run and, moving forward and learning some things. And then, the next level was, stepping away from that and, starting over in the 2000s. So tell me a little bit, because that was a much different growth path, in how you grew a company from scratch again. Yeah.
Yep. Well, my one of my other son, Jonathan, was doing real estate, investing, consulting, and so forth down in Chicago. And his idea was, rather than owning the buildings, that we would find investors rather than us owning the buildings, because we used to rent the buildings, but it was like owning them because it was a 20-year contract that, anyway, it was as close to owning it as we had all the financial responsibility. Yeah, yeah. And we decided we would go to a management contract, and so now the format that we have is that someone else owns the business and the building. We're a management company, and there are just more people out there that want to do that. They want to own the real estate. The industry has just changed. In the beginning, 20 years earlier, people didn't want to own they didn't want the responsibility of the buildings or the care. It's just transitioned into something different.
So one of the things that you did significantly different was, instead of developing and building brand new buildings, was you looked at one of your other strengths, which was turning around properties, correct?
Yes, turnaround. Yes, and I didn't say that. We looked for turnarounds, because we had done, in our own our own business, we had situations where what didn't go well, and we had to come in and really do some concerted effort things to get the turnaround in place. And we said, you know what, we did it internally, we can do it externally. And people were so happy and willing to pay for that turnaround process, as well as good management. And then once you're an owner, you can't act like only a manager. You can only act like an owner, whether you own it or not. It's just.
Yeah, and I think one of the other unique opportunities that you were able to take advantage of was finding properties that actually cost less for an investor than building something new. You could find prices because they weren't financially performing well. You could find discounted prices on some of these properties, bring an investor in, and have them purchase the building. You have a management contract and kind of a win-win partnership, getting these things turned around. So, as you continue to move forward and experience a number of different things in your own life. So tell me, I know, we had the unique experience of being able to provide care to some, for you, very, very close family members, immediate family. Tell me a little bit of how that was, the advantages and some of the challenges that you ran into by, providing care for your own father and then your own mother in these communities?
Yeah, it was, again, as we kind of started out here talking about when people know that there are relationships, family relationships, in terms of who you're working with or to whom you're giving care, it always raises a few eyebrows, and people have their antennas up to try to figure out what could be the downfall here. Maybe is the way to say it, but the it was just a matter of getting through and just talking to people and helping them to understand that we did have some expertise and that we weren't here to change, to change, but we were here to upgrade. We were here to make things better. We were here to be supportive. And
So I always tell the story, and correct me if I'm wrong. So, your dad, my grandpa, experienced a severe stroke at age 52. So he's 52 years old. So younger than I am now. He had a severe stroke and was not able to work. And his wife, my grandmother, your mom, had to be the primary caregiver for him at home. He did a number of things and was active, and she did everything she could for him. And she was the primary caregiver for 20 years. And a few months until she had what happen?
she had a heart attack, and she went into the hospital, and the doctor said, you've taken care of John, my dad. You've taken care of John now for 20 years. You can't do this anymore, and you need to find placement. And then we had, as luck would have it, we had a facility there in town, and so he could come up and, and it was not that many blocks, 7 or 8 blocks from our home, and Mom could see him a lot, but didn't have to do the cares.
So it took, I think one of the interesting things that it gave our family was a perspective of empathy, for the people we're serving at a whole new level of like, oh, wow, this is hitting our own family. And we went through a number of the emotional challenges and, with family dynamics and everything else that everybody goes through. I remember, your brother, my uncle, Kirk, who is an attorney involved with the business, on the legal side for quite some time, and he just didn't see it. He wasn't ready for the reality of, Dad can't live at home anymore. Mom can't take care of Dad. She had a health issue and is worn out, and it's, she's not physically able to do it. And I remember him not understanding is the best way to put it. He's not understanding. And even though he understood our business, he understood how it works and that this happens every day. But, once it becomes personal and in, all of the logic and, things go away when it's your family versus, dealing with it professionally. It's just a whole different world, coming to that acceptance of what needs to happen. So that was difficult. And then fast forward, so he lived there, for a period of time and ended up passing away. And then, fast forward sometime later, your mom, my grandmother Helen, started developing dementia herself. And she could no longer live at home. And, we had to go through all of that again in a different way. Living in a community because we didn't have a home in that same hometown. She had to live in someone else's community, and you tell me a little bit about the role, and we don't need to talk about the name of the community or anything else, but you had to play a role because of your experience with them.
Right. Well, yeah, and she had dementia, but they didn't really know much about dementia, so it was a lot of, kind of trying not to step on eggs and teach people and whatever. The saving grace was we got a call at one point. She had been there about a year and a half, I think. I don't think quite 2 years, and we got a phone call and said you need to come in. They were giving us a 30-day notice because 6 times Mom had turned the microwave, probably punched in 20 minutes when it should have been 2. It always happened with microwave popcorn, and it would smoke up the wood, and the firemen would come and the police would come and whatever, and they're like, we can't. Of course, I went in there and thought to myself, why didn't you just have us take this microwave home? But I didn't say a word because then Mom was, she didn't think she had any choice, and she came up. And then I could see her every day in our facility up in Madison. And she was at the age and she realized, well, I thought my friends were going to be able to come to see me a lot more. They're not, and so I guess I'm ready to go. So it all worked out. It all worked out well, but it's it's it was a process. And then she came up, and she was with us for several years before she passed away. So, but I could see her every single day because the facility was literally 3 minutes. So whether I was coming, if I was coming home at 10:30 at night, my mom would be waiting for me to, if I was up in Wausau and I couldn't just get back because I was she'd be waiting in bed, waiting for me to come. So I saw her every day with almost no exception.
Yeah, it was truly a, very fortunate experience to have her there, which then, fast forward another, I don't know if it's 20 years or whatnot to, where your story is now. You just turned 80. You're still very active in, senior living, and have a company, own a company that is still operating communities, and you still get up and do the things for those communities. And tell me a little bit about that now. How and why? I guess why is it that you feel the desire, the need to want to continue that at your age?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be really trite to begin with. Age is only a number, da. People say that. But I tried, I don't know exactly when, a few years ago, I tried retirement for like 15 minutes. It just wasn't for me. And so I wrote a proposal to my son, and I said, I would like to do this, and this, and these are the things I love. Oh, by the way, I'm not doing anything. If it's not fun for me, I'm not doing it. And if I'm doing something and it's not fun, I will call you, and you'll have to fix it. And he said, and I thought, well, he's going to say take a hike probably, but he said, oh, we'd love to. So I teach all the compliance classes. And, lots of people don't like the compliance classes because they can get kind of a rote. I just try to find ways that I can teach, A, the Harbor way, and B, also make it lots of stories, fun and interesting, and so forth. So I teach those every Tuesday. I teach, some of the classes are 3 hours, some are 4, some are 7 hours. But every week I do a class, and then I also do behavioral management because that's my with my nurse practitioner background, I know a lot about medications, and I've been doing this a long time. And then when you see what's going on not only in your area but around the state, you get new ideas. And so we've had down through the years, we've had very few residents that ever have been discharged because of, I would say, less than a dozen in 30 plus years that we've discharged because of behaviors, because we just don't give up.
And what makes us even more unique is your own personal story where you're at and how where you live today, and how that has evolved over the last few years.
Well, my husband about 5 years ago had a couple of major strokes, and I took care of him at home for about 4.5 years, and I just wore out. And of course, you tell people get help early and often. I didn't even realize I was wearing out, and you, Joel, and Jonathan came to me and said, "You're wearing out." And long story short, we looked at facilities. We decided on the facility here. It's not one of ours because our closest facilities are all dementia. And so we came into the apartment model. We have about 1,800 square feet. It's apartments. It's lovely. It looks like you're walking into an apartment, but with services. So now I can be my husband's wife. I can work, but I don't have to be his caregiver because the team members can do that. And it's been an absolutely godsend. And I get many questions about why in the world are you in assisted living? Well, because for us, that's what works well. And lots of, my husband can play euchre 3 times a week, and we have happy hour and entertainment and exercise 5 days a week. And yeah. So anyway, we have found it to be for our needs and what we can do, and maintaining it's just been an absolutely phenomenal, and that happens here and there. But I didn't realize how well it would work. Even though we have here and there in our facilities, we have people who are, like wives or husbands that are still working. Until I experienced it, I didn't realize how beneficial it would be.
Yeah, and it is really unique. I was been talking to people, for the last year plus since you moved in, about how proud I am of you and how you have continued to do this because you enjoy it so much, but how you are living in an assisted living community and operating other assisted living communities. I don't know that there's other people in the whole country that are doing that. There may be, but if there are, it's very few and far between. So it's a pretty wonderful story, and I am very proud of you.
Well, thank you.
I really wanted to just share.
I enjoy every minute. I just enjoy it so much.
Yeah. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing that this very personal story about the journey of your career.
Well, thank you. It's by the way, I did have something. I called my son one day and said, "This new software that the state has put out is driving me crazy. I love teaching the classes. I love doing everything. I'm not dealing with this software. Find somebody to do that for me." He said, "Okay, sure." So now I do everything except work with this software that is and so it's that's sort of the end of the story is what I can do still can be fun.
Yeah, so and that's the beauty of this this journey, that you've figured out how to adapt your role over time and continue to be able to do the things you really enjoy and delegate the things you don't. So I really want to thank you, Mom, for coming on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and it's fun to kind of reminisce. This is all this has been for me is reminiscing, and I've enjoyed it tremendously. So
well, thank you. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and I always get a little emotional, but that's who I am. So tell me more about what really drove you to be, to create an industry that didn't exist, to be a trailblazer in memory care services that now is pretty common, but you had to educate people on what it even was. What drove you for so many years, for the last 40 plus years?
Yeah. Well, I think there's really two things. One is was certainly my grandma Hattie. That whole experience was very traumatic. It lasted for about 4.5 years. There was nothing positive that really came out of it except to leave kind of a hole in my heart that could I help other people? Number one. The other layer of that is I just happened to be in a lot of the right places at the right time. Now, you can believe in the universe, you can believe in providing, you can believe in serendipitous whatever, but I just think that somehow I just ended up in the right place at the right time to be able to take the action. And maybe there's a third piece there that is part of my, it's part of my nature, is persistence. Is just saying, okay, that didn't work, but we're going to try something else. That didn't work, we're going to try something else. Oh, now this works. Okay, you know. So those are those are kind of the pieces that, some of it because of my drive, but some of it because of the opportunity. But I'm also interested in you're now staying in assisted living and sort of taking the torch a bit further. What is your motivation behind that?
Well, I was pretty young when, my great grandma Hattie, when you were involved in that, but I do remember it. I remember, you receiving phone calls from a nursing home, in a small town in Wisconsin asking for help because they didn't know what to do, how to handle those situations. And then fast forward to the point of I was in college and you're developing this whole new concept that didn't exist. And I was in healthcare administration and learning about all the different types of healthcare that you can be involved with. And I tell people this all the time. There was one point in college, I worked in an emergency room doing EKGs and very fast-paced environment. And I remember as you were doing all of this, starting this company, saying, well, I'll never work in assisted living. I'll never, work with seniors. And, fast forward, then I worked in a hospital and I saw different environments, but I saw what you were developing and I was very proud of what you were developing, and then really understood the true purpose of it and seeing how it affected so many people's lives and hearing from other people how it was making a difference in people's lives. And so then fast forward, being involved in it, as your business partner and Jonathan's business partner as an operator. And then I stepped away and was still in senior living, but I was doing, electronic health record software and other things and risk management and insurance and a number of different things. But ultimately, there was still a little bit of a hole in my purpose of wanting to directly make a difference in people's lives. And not only just the residents and their families, but there's one of the things that I have found really unique and really rewarding over the years is hearing about people who used to work for our company. And now they've moved on to other things and started their own companies or moved to other industries. But, back when I was younger, I worked for you guys at Harbor House and had a great experience and it really changed because of all the additional education and things we did for people. So when I had the opportunity a year ago to start a new management company and get back into the hands-on business of providing care, I jumped on it, and one of those situations I wish I would have gotten back into it sooner. I really miss that, and the difference that you make on a day-to-day basis in giving people career paths and helping families work through these very difficult situations, because I've gotten those calls for years and I haven't been as hands-on. So people are like, do you know a place in this town or in that town that provides great memory care service? And I'll research it and help find them something, but ultimately I like the idea of helping create that and helping carry on what you start.
it makes me very proud to have you carrying that forward, because I'm very proud of you. And it's one of those things you can't ever replicate, those 30 years of experience that you have, and you were never really out of assisted living. All the stuff always kind of was support or fringe, and that can only be of value.
Again, thanks again, and happy birthday from everybody here at Next Gen by NuCare, and we're really excited to be able to share your story with everybody. And you've met so many people, and so many people ask me about you when I go to conferences on a national level now. I'm really proud to say I'm your son. So thank you.
Yeah.